We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us, talking about guns, gun laws, gun safety, some of these recent incidents involving weapons with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association. You know, you hadn't been on with me since the story broke, you know, the horrible tragedy out of Chattanooga where those servicemen were shot and killed. And in the wake of that, you know, we had that whole debate about whether or not these military recruiting offices not allowing weapons in there. And Murfreesboro and some other communities around, I initially did the first story on those men who decided to go out front, and women, and protect. Yeah. You know, and I went out and talked to them, and they're well-meaning, and as far as I know, some of them may still be out there today. They swore they were going to stay there until the law was changed. But first, your first thoughts on the fact of the idea of having these guards there outside. Civilians, not at the request of the recruiting office. They didn't really issue a statement, but you know, being out there, I know initially many of them carried some of their weapons out, you know, the big scary looking ones to some, and
the effective ones.
And after after a while, though, I think because maybe it rattled some people, they put those away and were carrying sidearms.
Sidearms.
What's your take when you saw that they were doing that? What did you think?
They stood in and filled a gap that I think was created by the unwillingness of our governor to do what he should have done in the first place. Had the governor addressed the fact that under our Constitution, he's the commander-in-chief, and he had full authority the day it happened to issue orders.
For the National Guard. I don't think he could have for the federal offices.
He cannot for the federal offices, but he certainly can for the State Guard, the National Guard.
Right.
He had full authority over that, and we had a law, actually a rule, an order under his command since about 2001, I think, that disarmed National Guard. You know, it's the unarmed armed forces. It's a paradox in itself. But our governor, you know, what he ended up doing, I think, is a travesty in terms of standing up for the military in Tennessee. Because the order that finally came out when he dealt with this is he says soldiers, if they want to, and as long as it's not a federal property that he doesn't have jurisdiction over, they can have a personal firearm with them on their post, on base, at the recruiting stations, but it has to be concealed, it has to be worn on the hip, it has to be covered with a blouse or a jacket. And get this, the soldiers have to sign a report, a two-page letter that says it's their personal responsibility and personal choice, and if it's used, the government's not going to stand behind them. And on the second page of that document, it has this clause that says the weapon cannot have a magazine locked in it, which means it's empty.
Unarmed or unloaded.
Yeah, they can carry hammers, but they can't.
Yeah. But that's essentially it. It's not ready to go on a moment. Because so many of these incidents, though, you know, whether, let's just say they were all armed to the teeth in Chattanooga. You know, this guy who did this caught them all by surprise.
He did.
You know, and that's the thing. So much of this is the element of surprise. You can be armed, but if you don't see it going. Now, I know after the fact, maybe at the Antioch movie theater, he comes in, and then if there's some, then you can take action. But that's part of the problem. It's just so scary because it's a surprise.
And in a multi-victim shooting situation, the issue is if everybody's unarmed, everybody's a target. But if you allow them to be armed, either all of them or most of them or some of them, or it's a surprise, you may not stop the shooting. You could. We don't know. But what you could certainly have a good chance of doing is stopping the number of fatalities or reducing the number of fatalities.
How so? You'd have to stop the shooter.
You'd have to. Well, yeah. The whole objective is to stop the threat.
It's to stop the threat to you or to others. Because there's my concern. I suppose if I was in that theater, and this is what I kind of wanted to ask you, the big picture. So many people say, well, Nick, if there was a shooter coming in and you weren't armed and you were at risk, wouldn't you love it if someone else in the theater had the gun that could defuse it? Well, of course I would. Okay, that would be great. But my concern then is, again, these people have the permits, legal weapons, but they don't have the training. Like you heard Metro Police talk about how they would go to the Bellevue Mall and do active, you know, the empty Bellevue Mall and do active shooter drills, and they've gone through it. And, you know, I've talked to these gun experts who say, yeah, when you're really in a situation like that, I mean, training has to kick in. It can be panic, it can be scary. You can have a gun. I don't know what you'd do. You don't really know what you'd do in that case. I hope you have an idea of that you'd go. I would probably just get down, holding to a gun, and if the guy came around the corner, I might pop him. But I'm not going to get up there and start shooting across the theater, partially because I'm going to worry I'm going to hit someone else.
Right. Civilians, when they go through the current training in Tennessee, are taught that it's predominantly for your own self-defense.
Yes.
It's the last
Not to save
avenue.
others. That's what police need to do. If I can save someone, I would.
Yeah, legally that is an option, but That's not your function as an armed citizen.
Okay.
Your function is to seek cover and only use it if absolutely necessary, and not to intervene just because there's an opportunity. And that's the way the civilians are trained, because there's a lot of negative baggage that happens if you are the civilian that engages in a shooting, like third-party damage, you know, and you want to avoid that, because it's not why you're carrying. You're carrying for self-defense, not public defense.
Well, do you worry too if law enforcement had gone into that theater in Antioch and hypothetically there was the shooter with the hammer, the hatchet, and the pellet gun, but let's say someone else has a gun and they're trying to engage him. Now, if I'm a law enforcement officer that comes in and I don't know the situation other than there's a shooter, I'm looking and I'm seeing two people with guns drawn. This civilian who's just trying to defend himself, they could be mistaken for the gunman, right? Isn't that
absolutely. Yeah, one of the scenarios.
There's so many things to think about.
One of the scenarios that we have seen taught in the self-defense and advanced classes is, what do you do as a civilian if you come upon a situation where there are two people engaged in a gunfight and they both look rough?
Yeah.
And the problem is, you don't know if one of them is just an undercover narcotics officer taking an appropriate step, and who do you shoot, if anybody? And what they're typically taught is, in that situation, unless you're absolutely sure that the life that you're defending is either your own or someone that you know for sure is a victim, then you should be a witness. You should have your cell phone, you should protect yourself, you should seek cover, but don't engage because you don't know if it's an undercover officer, and you don't want to be the guy that shoots, you know, the vice squad guy.
Yeah, that's excellent advice, because you just, again, so easy for people sometimes, and they've called into this show to say, yeah, well, if I had been there with a gun, this wouldn't have happened. And maybe not. Maybe you could have made a difference. Can you think off the top of your head right now, of late, any recent cases where a man with a carry permit diffused a situation? There have been a few, and usually when they do, they make big news, because that's unusual.
It is unusual, and frequently, you know, what we don't know, because I know of some incidents where it has been a situation where someone's at an anytime teller or a cash machine or something, and they brandish their gun because they feel like they're being, and when I say brandish, they may have done nothing more than just pulled their coat back and revealed it.
Yes.
I know a story about a doctor from Vanderbilt who did that at an ATM somewhere near the campus.
Someone was approaching, or what do you mean?
Approaching. Well, you know, there was a news reporter a year or so ago that was shot at an
over
ATM.
At Fox, Erica Layton. Yeah, she was going through a drive-through.
So those things happen, and being able to just brandish the weapon, even if you don't pull it and fire it, is a deterrent effect. And so what happens is, other than like in Erica's case, you know, if it happens, it may never get reported. You know, and so we don't know, because of underreporting, the frequency with which that actually happens.
I bet that happens a lot, perhaps, where someone does have a gun. Like you said, they see something that could be perceived as trouble, and they just kind of brush it back, not to be threatening, but so that the person coming sees you have a gun.
It does happen.
And then they turn around and walk away.
Yeah, I hear that story with some frequency.
Okay, and the key there is just showing it. And that's okay, but I tell you, the other day I was going into a market, and there was a fellow with his 6 guns right here walking right past me, and I thought to myself, well, there he is, exercising his Second Amendment right here in Tennessee. But I thought, you know, as I walked out, I kind of turned to look back. Is he going to rob the place? I don't know that's what went through my head. And there was no indication. He wasn't. He was doing, but that's what I thought when I saw it. And that's sometimes the problem when you see guns. Maybe it's because it's so rare. If I saw it all the time, maybe I wouldn't think anything of it.
I see it constantly. I was in a Walmart recently having to pick up some stuff on my way to a meeting in East Tennessee, and the guy standing there at the counter near me is openly carrying. And the thought that goes through my mind as someone who's done this for 20 years and talked a lot to groups is, you know, if you're going to be in a public, it's one thing to be openly carrying if you're out on a farm or a gun range or someplace that's more remote. If you're in a dense area, or like a Walmart or a movie theater, revealing the fact that you're the one with the gun, it may upset some people, make them uneasy. It also tells the potential bad guy, you're the first one that needs to be shot.
That too. That's a great point. I wonder if they think about that. You're the first one. If I'm going to do something, now maybe a deterrent, they see it and turn around and walk out, there's a guy with a gun. But on the other hand, they may say, I'm dead set on robbing this place. we need to take him out right off the bat first.
Right.
By surprise, so he won't have a chance to get his guns out, and makes you a target. You're right, and if for no other reason. I mean, sometimes I see that and I go, are you doing this to be macho? Is there another issue here with you, or what? You know, when you're carrying them out in the open like that.
Right.
Do you have to go that way? Anything else in the works right now? Just as we're wrapping it up, we just have a minute left. Next legislative session, top of the list for the gun laws in the state.
We'll be looking at constitutional carry. We'll be looking at this Parks bill because it's a disaster.
Yeah. Just to clarify it all.
We want something simple that everybody can understand. And for your listeners that are interested, the Tennessee Firearms Association is 20 years old this year. We've been doing this for 2 decades. Okay. And we've got a birthday bash coming up on September the 19th, and we've got some great speakers coming. We've got Senator May Beavers, Joe Carr that ran against Lamar Alexander, Senator Mark Green are some of the speakers that will be highlighted at the event.
Will you be firing weapons into the air?
No, we'll be eating barbecue and baked beans, so we'll be having a good old country time.
By the way, it's illegal to do that, right?
No, it's not.
Well, what happens when the bullet comes down?
Well, it comes down. That's gravity, but it's not necessarily a crime. We have a statute.
But if a bullet hits you in the head that you shot up in the air, what do you think it would hurt?
Yes, it will come down as fast as it goes up usually.
Well, that's not good. I don't want to get hit in the head. You don't hear that often, but yeah, I mean, so
we had that at, you remember the fireworks display recently, and we have a statute, and the trick to the statute is that it has to be, if you discharge the weapon, directed to an individual or a group. And there's a court case that says if you just shoot up in the air, you know, sombrero style, you're not targeting anyone in particular. Yeah. And so it's not reckless endangerment directed towards an identifiable person or group.
But you know there's a chance that bullet's going to come down. What if it hits someone?
Well, that's true. There is a chance, and that's where negligence comes in. It's a civil remedy and not a criminal remedy.
I see. You know your laws, my friend. John Harris, thank you for coming on. We'll see you again sometime soon. This is always a topic. We'd love to have you as a regular guest, and appreciate all the phone calls. We'll see you soon, my friend. All right, take a break. Programming note right after this. Stay with us.